5. The concierge of the Manchester Hilton watched the scruffy old bag lady trying to negotiate the revolving doors with mild amusement, and he knew as she finally managed to squeeze her considerable bulk and baggage into the reception area that unless she was an eccentric millionaire, he was going to have to kick her right back outside again before she stunk up the place. On a good day, he may have pointed her in the direction of the kitchens in the alley around the back of the hotel, but today had not been a good day. 2 double-booked suits and a bar fight had seen to that. So Mrs. Shopping Bags better flash her gold cards, or she'd be out on her arse, and he would at least feel a little bit better about his shitty day. The bag lady waddled up to the front desk and plunked her bags down. She muttered something about the freezing weather, and her aching legs then looked up at him. He braced himself for that old lady smell of dirty clothes and weak old piss, but the concierge was surprised that she actually smelled of lilac even though her clothes looked dirty and worn, and he forgot for a moment that he was supposed to be throwing her out. "Are you dumb, boy?" she said in a surprisingly educated if harsh voice. "Or are you hoping to catch some flies with that gaping maw of yours?" The concierge closed his mouth, and it crossed his mind that she may actually be some kind of upper-class nutter. "Can I help you?" he said lamely. "Well, I fucking hope so, Sparky. I'm here to see Thomas Whitaker." She gave him a look of thinly veiled disgust. He shook his head, her language catching him off guard. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." He hesitated at using the word madam. "I'm unable to divulge information as to who we have staying here, if you had an appointment." "Just get him on the phone. I know he's here, but he's properly using some other name or other." She thought for a moment. "Marcus Carver. He said he was using the name Marcus Carver." The concierge glanced at the register. "Do you want me to spell it for you, sweetie?" she added. And there it was, room 47. Someone had drawn a little smiley face next to it, the way they always did when a guest was obviously using a false name. "I'll have to ring up, just to make sure, Mr. Carver is expecting guests." "Christ on a bike," she exclaimed loud enough to make him flinch, and several people in the lobby turned their way. He fumbled with the phone and punched in the room's telephone number. He was hoping that Carver, or whatever his name was, would pick up straight away. He had an uneasy feeling about this woman, and wanted her gone as soon as possible, and despite how he had felt when he'd first seen her struggling through the door, he didn't want to have to tell her to get out anymore. She may have been old and short, but that look in her eye actually scared him. He stood there sweating with the phone clamped to his ear for what seemed like an eternity until finally a weak voice answered. "Yes?" It was barely a whisper. Yes, Mr. Carver. This is the concierge calling from downstairs." He swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. The back lady was boring a hole into his head with her icy gaze. "I have a lady here to see you, sir." He heard a sharp intake of breath. "Describe her," he said. The concierge felt physically sick at this. She was still staring at him, her eyes narrowed. "What did he say?" she asked. He asked me to describe you." His voice trailed off. Carver may as well have asked him to tell her to go fuck herself. She let out a shriek of laughter and put her elbows on the desk. She grinned, revealing a mouth full of gold teeth. "Go on then. Describe away." The concierge swayed. He felt faint, which made the old woman shriek again. "Heh. Don't worry," said the voice on the phone. "I'd recognize that cackle anywhere. Send her up." Oh, thank Christ, the concierge said out loud before he could stop himself. You can go up, miss. Room 47. The lift's right over there. He gestured to his left. He was about to hang up when the woman slammed her hand on the desk. Hey, not so fast. I want 2 lobsters and a bottle of champagne sent up. Whitaker's paying. I heard her, Whitaker said through the phone. Get her whatever she wants. Yes, sir, the concierge said, hanging up. And it better be the fucking good stuff, not some old piss poured into a vintage bottle. Understand? The old woman narrowed her eyes suspiciously. He nodded vigorously. I'll order it straight away, madam. She snorted at this and waddled over towards the lifts, muttering obscenities. Watching her go, the concierge thanked God she hadn't asked him to carry her filthy bags up for her. Yes, he said to himself, this was one shitty day. First things fucking first, Tommy. What the fuck are you doing in a place like this? Low profile. She wasn't even in the room yet, and she was tearing a strip off Whitaker. He stood there holding the door open, and just took it. You've got the world, and his dog looking for you. So where do you hide? She continued. The fucking Hilton. I suppose because it's out here in the provinces and not London. You thought no one up here would know who the fuck you are? Is that it? You numb bastard. Good to see you too, Mary. Find the place all right? Whitaker shot back. He was desperately trying to keep his voice steady and his gaze firm, his best courtroom facade, but he knew the old hag could see right through it. This was only the second time he'd met Mary, but that was too many. Mary barged past him and dumped her shopping bags onto the sofa. She glanced around the hotel room with a look of mild disgust. Yeah, I found the place all right. What the fuck is Marcus Carver when he's at home anyway? Whitaker shrugged. An artist's agent I represented once. Think he's dead now. It was the first name that came into my head. If he isn't dead, he can sue me if he likes. Besides, you told me not to use my real name. I did? Mary seemed genuinely surprised. Must have had a good reason. Then she seemed to remember. Shucks, she added. What? Although he barely knew the woman, Whitaker had already grown accustomed to her way with words. She would throw random sentences around, and then it was up to you to arrange them into some semblance of order or meaning. What do you mean, what? She said and waddled over to the minibar, which Whitaker had been attacking with a vengeance all day. She helped herself to a gin. Mary. Whitaker took a moment. He had to keep calm, had to remember that what this reggerty old dear knew about the people who were after him, and Larry could save his life. And more besides, if the rumors were true. I don't have a lot of time. Huh, no shit, Mary snorted and downed the gin in one, which made her pull a face. Do you have my money? Whitaker gestured to an envelope on the table. 5,000. Now what exactly am I buying? Apart from your lovely company, of course. Protection, knowledge, a crash course in the world as it really is. Standard stuff should help. Maybe if you start thinking straight and lay off the fucking booze. With this she uncaped another mini gin and downed it. You must have a clear mind, Whitaker. I can only help you so far, given the shit you're drowning in right now. You and McCulloch. Pair of dumb shits that you are. You know I could have sold you out for 10 times that much. Mary abandoned the minibar and picked up the envelope of money. She felt the weight of it in her hands. 10s and 20s. Good boy. So, why didn't you? Whitaker suddenly wanted her gone. He was desperate, yes. But had he really sunk this low? Taking protection advice from a bag lady. I'm neutral, she said. Wouldn't have been fair, let them find you in their own way, if that's the way it has to be. You've hired me. I'll do my best for you. Then I'm gone. You people can fight it out amongst yourself. I don't give two shits if you're dead by the end of the day. But if that's the case, it won't be because of me. I'll have done my bit, fair and square. She tossed the envelope into one of her bags and then dumped the contents of one of the others onto the table. That's very reassuring. Thanks. Whitaker watched as she rummaged through the various charms and trinkets she had in the bag, which were mixed in with what looked for all the world like the contents of someone's rubbish bin. Where is it? Mary said, frowning. She picked up what looked like a minute metal dream catcher, twirled it, then threw it back amongst the crap and shook her head impatiently. This drove Whitaker over to the minibar. He took out a vodka, popped the cap, and sipped it. What's all this about sharks, anyway? Don't tell me Jaws is after me too? This brought a smile to his face. The first one in what felt like weeks. He finished the vodka and tossed the empty into the waste basket. What? Mary grunted. What the fuck have sharks got to do with anything? Whitaker turned to face her. She had laid out several of the trinkets, which ranged from what looked like charms off a charm bracelet, a couple of old coins, and another of the dream catcher things, on the coffee table by the sofa, and was now stuffing the rest back into the carrier bag. The vodka soothed him a little. You brought the fuckers up, he said. Now what are those things for? He gestured at the trinkets. She gathered them together and gave him a sideways glance. Now I'm gonna tell you a bunch of stuff, Whitaker, she said, her tone serious. Trust me, you won't believe half of it. But that doesn't matter. Just follow my instructions to the letter, and you may live a little longer. I gonna need another drink? Shit, yeah. And pour me one too, she said. And where is my champagne and lobsters anyway? The service here is shit. With this, she stretched out on the sofa and made herself at home. You should try the London Hilton. Now that's a fucking palace. If she kicks her shoes off, I'm going out the window, Whitaker thought as he watched her make herself at home. Once again, the ghost of a smile played on his lips. Christ, that's twice in one day, he mused. Maybe I should keep this loon around for comic relief. Christ with egg in his beard. What are you grinning at, man? Mary snapped. I asked you about my lunch. I'm trying to save your soul here, fancy pants. The least you can do is feed a girl. The smile evaporated right off Whitaker's face, along with the soothing effect of the vodka, at the word soul. He felt cold, his mouth suddenly dry. Now he remembered why Mary was here, forget her eccentric dress and comic foul mouse. This woman had knowledge of a world Whitaker knew nothing about, but one he was now up to his neck in. Supernatural shit, she had called it when they first met. Although the sane side of his brain wanted to laugh off comments like that, it had only confirmed what he already knew. He'd pissed off the darkness, and now it was out there somewhere, looking for Larry McCulloch And the best way to find Larry? This idiot right here in the Armani suit. He physically shivered, suddenly cold as his mind drifted to a freezing November night last year, of sitting in the relative warmth of his Mercedes, looking through a frost-covered windscreen at 6 haunted faces, standing in a polished field in the middle of nowhere, lit by the car headlights, waiting for those around them to decide their fates. 6 lives saved, albeit unknowingly, by a con man and his greedy hotshot young lawyer. Whitaker shivered again and realized that while he had zoned out, he had wrapped his arms tightly around himself. For comfort or warmth, he didn't know. He tried to speak, but the words got caught in his dry throat. Mary was staring at him with a perplexed look on her face. She had put her feet up on the table, but thankfully her shoes were still on. The mismatched pair looked at each other for what seemed like an age, and then Mary suddenly jumped to her feet, her face ablaze with recognition. "Sharks," she announced to the room at large. "Christ, what a crew cut! Sharks!" She clicked her fingers together for punctuation. "They can find you through your name. That's why I told you to use an alias." "What?" "Your name. It's like sharks. They can sense movement in water from miles away, or the merest drop of blood, and all that Discovery Channel shit. It's the same with your name, Larry too, I imagine. That's one of the reasons for the false name. If someone uses your name, even thinks it, it sends out ripples of psychic energy. They can lock onto it, follow it to its source, like a shark. You'll need something to block this." She examined the trinkets on the table and frowned. "Fuck all here for that." Whitaker could almost hear the cogs turning in her brain as she pondered. "Fuck." Whitaker whispered to himself in disbelief and pinched the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger and screwed his eyes shut. When he opened them again, he half expected, hoped she would be gone along with all this madness. "What?" he said again. It was all his brain could conjure up. She held up a finger to silence him. "1 second." She put her fingers into her mouth and began to pull at one of her front teeth. Although she didn't seem to feel any pain, Whitaker winced for her as she tried to wrench the tooth free. "Mary, for Christ's sake!" She glared at him, her eyes watering, then with a soft pop pulled out a bloodied gold tooth. She held it out to him with a gap-toothed grin. Whitaker stared at it incredulously. "Fuck that," he said. She rolled her eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood onto the insanely expensive carpet. "Don't be such a big girl's blouse, Whitaker. You can clean it first," she lisped. "That's worth more than 500 on its own. Carved it myself. Take a look." With this, she tossed it to Whitaker, who caught it without thinking and was surprised at its weight. He shuddered, rolling it around in the palm of his hand, and was about to throw it in the waste bin when he saw it was covered in an intricate pattern of lines, shapes, and symbols, carved by a master craftsman, or woman in this case. "Don't worry," Mary said. "You don't have to get it inserted or anything." She laughed at this and spat out more bloody saliva. "Just keep it with you. It's got a pretty good range. Should block any ripples from your name. You can use your name and anyone close to you can. And you should be okay. Or at least I think so." She waddled over to the minibar, trailing lilac, and took out another small bottle of gin. She took a drink and swallowed it around her mouth, before spitting it out in the wake direction of the waste bin. Whitaker held up the tooth to the light. Now I can safely say I've seen it all. Mary grunted at his side. You ain't seen or heard shit yet, she said, taking another drink. This time she swallowed and smacked her lips. Ripples from your name? Charms made out of gold teeth? All of a sudden, Whitaker felt like he was a subject of some elaborate reality TV prank show. Not felt, wished. He felt faint all of a sudden. He vaguely heard the knock at the door, and for a second mused that maybe it was the prank show host about to burst in to reveal all and tell Whitaker it was all a joke, and he was free to go home and back to his guilt-edged life. But if it was the host, then he was doing a damn good job as disguising himself as room service. Mary instructed the kid to bring in the lobster and champagne, and then get the hell out. He even heard her threaten to pull out another tooth if the kid wanted a tip. Evidently he didn't, judging by the speed in which he exited. Mary was mumbling something as she sat down and attacked the lobster. But all Whitaker could hear was the blood rushing through his ears and his stomach doing backflips. He looked down at the blooded tooth in his sweaty palm. Later, after she had demolished the lobsters and drained most of the champagne, Mary would tell him everything she knew about the darkness that was coming and what laid in waiting for him inside of it, should it ever catch up and smother him. And as she spoke, Whitaker could feel the last vestiges of his sanity slowly slipping away.